this month. We're coming to kind of to the home stretch of this. Today, we're going to start talking about the concept of defense in depth. And for the next few episodes in this series, that's what we're going to be talking about. So, when we talk about security of the network and defense in depth as a concept, what we really mean is that for true security to take place, you have to have multiple kinds of defense to address multiple kinds of attackers. And I like to use the image of a castle to kind of demonstrate that. If you look at traditional castles, they're not just one singular wall surrounding a bunch of valuables, right? It's not a big pile of gold in the middle of some concrete bunkers. Um, from overhead, you can see that a traditional castle has multiple layers of walls. So you have these outer walls, you have gates that might be controlling access, you have towers inside so you can get better viewpoints and vantage points from what's coming. You have an interior wall. Even within the walls, you have rooms, and networks are really no different. So for this episode, let's talk about the external or the perimeter defenses of your network. The immediate item that comes to mind is obviously a firewall. Um, Firewalls are there to ensure that the traffic coming in and out of your network are what you want them to be and not the bad guys. So if we go back to our castle, they're really the gates, right? And even some security at the gates. So while naturally all of our data is surrounded by walls because we have to intentionally add access to it for them to be available, especially to the internet, the role of a firewall is to make sure that the stuff that is passing through is the stuff that you want. Traditional old firewalls or stateful firewalls were pretty simple. You could say, yes, I want this kind of protocol to pass through. So things like HTTPS, or I want, port 25 for SMTP or whatever ports you wanted available, you would open up and you would point to a specific server or endpoint inside the network, and it would allow that kind of traffic. Modern firewalls or next gen firewalls, although they're current gen at this point, do a little bit more. They actually assess the traffic coming in over those ports to make sure that not only is it the right kind of traffic, but ideally it's not coming from a really bad place or its reputation isn't poor or the content of that traffic isn't mismatched from what it's supposed to be. So, for example, it's not files leaving your network under the guise of DNS. So, firewalls are your primary sort of perimeter defense. But in addition to that, we have additional things like email filtering. So most businesses use email, and for a long time, all of our mail servers were kept on premise inside of our networks. This meant that we needed holes poked in that firewall to allow mail to come in and out. Even today, the most common way people get compromised is phishing, and that's purely an email based attack, or very often an email based attack. So we have email security appliances, we have email security software, things like Barracuda, things like Microsoft Defender for Microsoft 365. Google Workspace has its own built-in spam filtering, and there's a number of other products on the market. But the role of a spam filter is to not only allow the good stuff through, but to review what's happening and saying, "Hey, this email looks suspicious. Let's block it, or put it into a holding area at the very least, so somebody can take a look at it." It can also look and say, "Hey, yeah, this is definitely garbage based on where it's coming from," and delete it and block things for you automatically. So a spam filter is like a very specialized gate guard in our castle sort of example, right? They're there to check to make sure the mailman is actually carrying good letters and not poison or some such. And then the last major kind of perimeter defense that a lot of organizations are seeing right now are products like Cloudflare, right? And they're protecting against attacks. A DDoS attack is when a whole bunch of different generally infected systems start just spewing traffic at a target with the hope of knocking it offline. Products like Cloudflare and some of their tool sets, what they do is they stand up kind of a distributed network ahead of your stuff, so ahead of your website or ahead of your application. And when the bad guys attack it, they take the hit and they distribute it across their network. They use their technology to mitigate it, to block it, and while also allowing the good traffic that you do want to access the application that you're protecting. So it's another good example of just a series of walls, right? So this outer wall might be your Cloudflare, and it could be saying, okay, well, if any major armies are coming, hopefully this really big wall on the outside just keeps them back. But if anybody does get through, then we start saying, okay, well, somebody's trying to sneak in via phishing now, so this inside wall might get them, or this gate, and our firewall might stop them. So defense in depth is about understanding that there's lots of kinds of attacks. Not one defense will stop all of them, and that there's multiple layers that are needed in order to make sure everything on your network is secure. So this is our perimeter layer discussion. Coming up, we'll talk about some of the other layers. So happy day 25.